Okay, time for some more on Iranian institutions. We've introduced the president to you. Let's stay with the president for this second. He's in the left side of this chart at the top. FYI, the names in the boxes might be a little bit out of date. This is a chart in a book about world politics, and world politics changes pretty quickly. But anyway, the institutional structures of Iran are still the same. So let's take a look at it. The nation elects the president. So the Iranian people elect the president. The president appoints his cabinet. The Council of Ministers is what it's called. There are 22 ministers. They have to be confirmed by the parliament. Also, the parliament can impeach the president, so it has that check on his power as well. So far, so good, right? Nothing too unusual or too surprising. A president with a cabinet that's approved by parliament. In the top middle of the chart, you have the Assembly of Experts. That's basically the ulema, or the clergy. They are popularly elected, and they appoint the supreme leader. Officially, they could remove the leader as well. And remember, the supreme leader has a lot of power. But the leader appoints the people who approve candidates to the Assembly of Experts. That's the Council of Guardians. More on them later. So the leader appoints many in the Council of Guardians who ultimately have to approve the Assembly of Experts to run in the election. So there's a kind of indirect way in which the supreme leader can be sure that those who end up being in the Assembly of Experts are friendly and sympathetic to him. All right, on to the leader. He's right in the middle of everything, both in this chart and in Iranian politics. Notice that all the arrows coming out of his box are appointments. Dotted lines signify appointments. He appoints half of the Council of Guardians. He appoints the Expediency Council. More on that later as well. He appoints the head of the media. Not a sign that Iran is leading the world in civil liberties if the head of the media is appointed by the supreme leader. He appoints the leaders of the military units, such as the commanders of the Revolutionary Guard. It's a very powerful position. On the right, you see Parliament, known as the Majlis. It's a unicameral assembly, meaning that's the only house of the assembly that there is Parliament. It's popularly elected by universal suffrage. Everybody gets to vote, all adults at least. It has 290 members. The members of the Parliament must be Muslims, except the Constitution stipulates that 5 members of Parliament must represent specific religious groups: Christians, Jews, and Zoroastrians. Christians have 3 seats, Jews 1, and Zoroastrians 1 as well. The trend is towards electing more women to parliament and fewer clerics, maybe reflecting the demographic shifts, the larger number of young people in Iran, the overall movement of Iran towards a more reformist, progressive, whatever you want to call it, type of government. The parliament does have some oversight over the executive branch, as we mentioned a few minutes ago. It can approve, or it has to approve cabinet appointments, and it can remove ministers. But at the end of the day, it's a legislative body. It makes laws to govern life in Iran. However, some features of the system limit the parliament's legislative roles. First of all, the laws it passes cannot contravene the Constitution or Islam. That's not a big deal. That leaves a lot to be done. But more significantly, any bill can be vetoed by the Council of Guardians. So let's talk about them a little bit there on that in the right-hand column as well. The Council of Guardians has the job of ensuring that Iran remains the Islamic Republic of Iran. The Council of Guardians checks the conformity of the laws with Islam. So if Parliament passes something, the Council of Guardians determines whether or not it is in conformity with Islam, and if it's not, then those laws don't go in the books. The council contains 6 members of the clergy, of the ulema, who are appointed by the leader. So the leader appoints half of the people who get to decide which laws are keeping in the spirit of Islam, and the council contains 6 lay Muslim lawyers as well, who are nominated by the judiciary and approved by the parliament. Now, the ulema, or the clergy, in the Council of Guardians determine whether a law is in conformity with Islam. The Muslim lawyers, who are the other half of the Council of Guardians, they, along with the ulema, say whether a law is in conformity with the Constitution. So it's the ulema who have more of a function within the Council of Guardians, because they determine both the constitutionality and the consistency with Islam of any law that's passed. The ulema, as I think I mentioned, are appointed by the leader, and the lawyers are come from Parliament. Okay. In the top middle of the chart, you have the Assembly of Experts, which is, oops, sorry, already covered that. Yeah, sorry, note problems. The Council of Guardians, still on that. The Council of Guardians also supervises elections, which means that it can deny candidates from running. They disqualify candidates who they do not support. That's a pretty big power, right? So the Council of Guardians gets to decide who gets to run in the elections for Parliament and for President. Pretty big check on the people's power. The Parliament and the Council of Guardians don't always agree. The Parliament doesn't like passing laws only to have those laws nullified by the Council of Guardians. And so in 1989, a new body was created, the Expediency Council, which appears in the middle of the chart here. Excuse me. Right here, 31 members of the Expediency Council. It determines what is in the interest of the regime. It's a collection of prominent officials and clergy who arbitrate disputes between the Parliament and the Council of Guardians. So you have these two bodies which sometimes conflict. So they created a third body, the Expediency Council, to arbitrate disputes between those two bodies. Okay. The Expediency Council is appointed by the leader, also helps the leader formulate policy. So another place where the leader is involved in the policy-making process. This is a lot of new kind of institutions and ways they relate to each other to take into account. I know, as you can see, I'm kind of having to check my notes on it as well as I'm explaining it, but stick with me and it'll make sense. Here's the takeaway from it. The Islamic Republic is not a democratic republic, not even close. Both unelected people and unelected bodies within the Iranian government restrict the ability of Iran's representative bodies to act. So the representative bodies in the Iranian government have limits on their ability to act, and those limits are placed by unelected people and unelected bodies. That makes this not democratic. What's really interesting here, though, and which your book points out, is that the Constitution is honest about all this. The denial of rights, the subversion of democracy, this is all perfectly legal. The constitutions of most authoritarian regimes don't read like this. They read like the U.S. Constitution, written in universalist language, assuring rights even if they aren't actually protected in practice. But here it describes all these things that we're talking about, these things that these checks on power and these unelected people and unelected bodies that make Iran non-democratic. It's constitutional because it's in the Constitution. Another takeaway point from all this is that the leader is supreme. He holds more power than anyone. He stops reforms that he doesn't like. And so this is where it's helpful to compare processes rather than structures. The head of state here has a policy-making role, like the head of state in the U.S., but unlike the head of state in Britain or Germany, which is more symbolic than anything else. So when you're paying attention to Iranian politics in the years to come, don't be distracted by the Ahmadinejads or the Rouhanis or the presidents. Anybody who becomes president only has as much rope as the leader grants them. Final takeaway point here. There are two Irans, which is to say that there are multiple power centers within the Iranian government. In particular, there are two of everything. There's the military and the Revolutionary Guard. There's the official police and the secret police. The reason goes back to the 1979 revolution. So remember, the Shah of Iran during his reign created the Iranian state and created a government that had a monopoly on the use of force, that provided services to Iranians that were, at least to some degree, modern. Rather than dismantle the government that existed under the Shah, when the revolution happened in 1979, the new regime left in place the old system to carry out government duties and just built new institutions with similar roles on top of it. So it's almost like you have two governments existing within the same political society. And they're all interconnected, of course, as we saw in that incredibly complex chart. But you have the kind of old regime, the old government structure, and overlaying that a kind of duplicate structure that reflects more the desire of Iran to be a theocracy, or to stay consistent with its religion and with the will of God. So we see this power struggle play out even in the people who are trying to control Iran, but the competition between the reformists and the conservatives, and the protests you see in the streets of Iran. This is definitely a complicated and divided country. Fascinating country, and we can, I think, learn a lot about the way that institutions work by studying it. Okay, so that's the basic structure of government of Iran. It might take watching this video 2 times or reading the textbook to really get a grasp on it, but nonetheless, there it is. All right, talk to you next video.